I'd like to open your Bibles to Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21. We're going to read there and then very shortly turn to 1 Samuel chapter 25. Thank you, Noah, for helping us praise God in song. Good to see you this morning. If you're among our guests, thank you for being here. I would apprise you that the first Sunday in December, I think that's the 3rd, Brother Paul Earnhardt will be with us. In our men who preach the gospel age 80 and over, Brother Paul will be here to spend that day with us. The Sunday prior to that, Brother Paul Williams, who we support in South Africa, have for a number of years, he's in the United States visiting different congregations that support him and have fellowship with him. Brother Paul will be with us on the 26th of November. So look forward to having those two men be with us on those two consecutive Sundays. In Luke chapter 21, I want to read verses 1 through 6 with you, please. And he looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw a certain poor widow putting in 2 mites. And so he said, "Truly I say to you, that this poor widow has put in more than all. For all these of their abundance have put in offerings for God, but she out of her poverty put in all the livelihood that she had." Then as some spoke of the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and donations, he said, "These things which you see, the days will come in which not one stone will be left upon another, that shall not be thrown down." It's interesting in the Bible narrative, the things that Jesus sees versus the things that others see. And it's interesting when Jesus sees these scenes that take place, people that are easy to pass by, how when he notices them, they become accentuated. In Luke chapter 21, the disciples are concerned with when is the destruction of Jerusalem going to come? What's going to happen to the temple? And the disciples are focused on the carnal things. But Jesus is focused on this one, he says, poor widow. The disciples are focused upon the grand things. And Jesus is focused upon this one poor woman. I wonder which of those would we have noticed? Which of those would we have paid the better attention to? In 1 Samuel chapter 25, you find another story in the life of David. You find the time when David is now a king. But you find the story also contains a fool. But you find the story contains one that is easy to overlook, like that poor widow, a godly woman. As 1 Samuel chapter 25 opens, Samuel has been a prominent figure, but he has now died. Abigail is overshadowed by David and by Nabal. And when you read chapter 25, really what you have in chapter 25 are 3 different acts, as though it were a play. And in those acts are different scenes. And so I want to explore this chapter with you this morning from that particular paradigm. In Act chapter 1, you have an unkind refusal. In Act 2, you have a gracious redemption. In Act 3, you have in the valley. And in Act 4, you have a just recompense. And then finally, there are lessons for us to learn, to take home from this. David has been in the cave of Adullam. And now then, the men that were 400 have grown to be 600. And so his company of men that have been with him have exponentially grown. And so you come to verse 1 of chapter 25. Then Samuel died, and the Israelites gathered together and lamented for him and buried him at his home in Ramah. And David arose and went to the wilderness of Paran. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and it was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding, beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. Here we have Act 1, Scene 1. And in Act 1, Scene 1, Samuel has now been buried, and you have the description of Nabal and Abigail. Abigail is described as a woman that is beautiful and good of understanding. Have you ever met someone, seen someone that you thought, man, she is just beautiful, or he is so handsome? And then you sit down and you talk to him or her, and you find out that that's about as deep as it goes. Abigail would be what would be considered the perfect package. She is a woman of intelligence, and she is a woman of beauty. And in this particular scene, you have Nabal that is out shearing his sheep, a man of great wealth, a man with 3,000 sheep, a man with 1,000 goats. But he is described as a man that is evil. He's a man that is described as harsh. Later in the chapter, he'll be described as a man that is a scoundrel by one of the servants of Abigail. You then come to verse 4. And it said, when David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, David sent 10 young men. And David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say to him who lives in prosperity, peace be to you, peace be to your house, and peace to all that I have. Now I have heard that you have shearers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them, nor was there anything missing from them all the while they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand and to your servants and to your son David. In the second scene, you have David now sends his men to Nabal in his name. That'll become important in just a moment. But notice what David and his men have been doing. David and his 600 men have been, as it were, policing the wilderness. They've been going throughout the wilderness, and David says to Nabal, here are my men, and by the way, you've been shearing your sheep, and you're a man of great prosperity, and you're a man that can provide, and your shepherds have been with my men, and we've not hurt anything, and by the way, we have protected all your flock. You've been the rancher, we've been the range sheriffs, the range police, if you will, and not a bit of your flock, none of your men have been hurt. Will you provide for them? Now David's not asking for 1,000 sheep per hour for the services rendered. David is just simply saying, here's a mutual consideration. And I'm asking out of a mutual consideration, we have protected all that is yours and nothing's been harmed. Will you not in kind provide for my men? And Nabal's response is, who is David? And then he says, furthermore, verse 11, shall I then take my bread, my water, my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men whom I do not know where they are from? So David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told him these words. Then David said to his men, every man gird on his sword, every man gird on his sword. And David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went with David, and 200 stayed with the supplies. Notice Nabal says, first of all, who is this man David? Well, Nabal knows who David is. David is the king. It's more in line with, who does he think he is? Asking me this. Who does he think he is coming to me like this? And by the way, it may be, as he says in verse 10, that he has servants who are run away from their masters. Why would I in some way facilitate, provide for this man who has servants who have run away from their masters? Why would I treat him that way? And David's response would be that which would be in kind. Then if you're going to treat us that way, we've been protecting you, then okay, now we're going to go and we're going to take from you what is yours, because you've not justly rewarded us. Here is an unjust treatment that David's men have received at the hand of Nabal. We then come to verse 14, and you have Act 2, Scene 1. Now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us by day and night. All the time we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore, know and consider what you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against his household, for he is a scoundrel that one cannot speak to him. In the midst of the discussion that you have between David and Nabal, you have another cameo scene. And what you have in this story is you have several scenes that are running parallel together. We would call those cameos, where you're watching a scene on a show, and while that scene is taking place, there's something else that's taking place at the same time, and then the camera shifts from this scene to the next scene. And so you see the scene that is running parallel. So here you have David and Nabal, and Nabal makes David wait. He doesn't respond immediately. His further contempt for David is that he makes him wait, and then he says, who do you think you are? And now then, the servants go to Abigail. And they say to Abigail, we are in danger because your husband, who is a scoundrel. And by the way, notice it says that one of the servants who said, verse 15, but the men were very good to us. They greeted our master. One of the servants greeted the master, and they were very good to us. But one of the servants said, but Nabal, your husband, is a scoundrel. Now, fellas, got to be pretty bad for one of the servants in the house to say to the fellow's wife, and by the way, your husband's fixing to get us all killed. And beside that, he's a scoundrel. And then live. It'd be one thing to do it and then have the response of the wife say, but wait a minute, you can't talk to my husband like that. But she acknowledges who he is. And so you come to verse 18. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisin, 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on the donkeys. And she said to her servants, go on before me, I am coming after you. But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. Now, pause just a moment. Ladies, are you impressed with Abigail's response here? When the kids come home for the holidays, or when the grandkids come home for some time in the summer or during the year to stay with us, the first place they go when they come in the house is to the pantry. Chris will come, and the first thing he will do is he will come and he will open the pantry, and he'll stand at the door of the pantry and he'll go, wow. Because Nana has the pantry packed. Here's Abigail. We don't have the days of refrigeration. Don't have the days of pantries. And now then, just seemingly at this moment when her husband and his men are threatened, she turns and just so happens to have these great rations on hand to provide this meal. Ladies, how would it be? How would you respond if your husband calls you on the way home from work and says, by the way, dear, the CEO is in town today, along with the president and the vice president, and a few other board of directors, and I have invited them over for supper tonight. How would you respond to that? Would you say, well, it's going to be chicken noodle soup and bologna sandwiches? Would you have available in the pantry the goods, the wherewithal, the ability to rise and make what Abigail has now put together for David and his men? I just find that a fascinating part of the scene. So she tells them, you go ahead. So, verse 20, it was as she rode on the donkey that she went under cover of the hill, and there were David and his men coming down toward her, and she met them. And David said, surely, in vain I have protected all this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him, and he has repaid me evil for good. May the God do so, and more also to the enemies of David, if I leave one male of all who belong to him by morning. So the second scene that you have, the second act that you have in this scene is that now Abigail is informed and David has made a threat, and David intends to carry that threat through to its end. Nabal is not going to insult me before my men. Not going to insult my men. We have protected him. We've cared for him. And he's not going to insult me like that. He has returned evil for good. And by the way, I'm the king. And I'm going to take care of Nabal. Now, here you have the cameos. David's talking to his men this way. He's going this way. Now Abigail is coming on her donkey as the goods are also being delivered. You come then to scene 2 of Act 2. Now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. So she fell at his feet and said, on me, my Lord, on me let this iniquity be, and please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your maidservants. Now you find in this particular scene in the valley, notice the first thing that she does. She dismounts and she falls with her face to the ground. What has she done? Is she afraid of the king? No, the next verse explains it. She fell on the ground and said, on me, my Lord. On me, my Lord, let this iniquity be on me, and please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. What has she done to say, on me, my Lord? She's done nothing. But what she's doing is she's taking the guilt and the responsibility of Nabal on herself. And what she's saying is, I'll offer myself as a sacrifice for the idiocy of my husband and how he behaved as an evil man and as a scoundrel. Then she says, verse 25, and notice how she describes her husband. Please let my Lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek harm for my Lord be as Nabal. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to your Lord, let it be given to the young men who follow. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Lord will make certain for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. In this particular scene, she further expresses how that she will take on the responsibility of her husband. But notice how she now turns David. She turns from the carnal point of view to a spiritual point of view. And the spiritual point of view that she turns to is she says, David, please don't do this. You're the king. And you are going to sit on the throne one day, and when you sit on the throne, you don't want bloodshed on your hands. And by the way, David, let me remind you, the battle is the Lord's. This is not your battle. This is the Lord's battle. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord. David, you've got better things to do. You're the king. You've got better things to do than to worry about this slight, this scoundrel has enacted upon you. And by the way, if you take out this vengeance on this scoundrel who's acting in this way towards you, you're going to be the king one day, and you're going to have blood on your hands, and you don't want to be the king with blood on your hands. Please don't do this, David. Don't act that way. Don't take this vengeance upon yourself. And so you come to verse 29. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life. But the Lord of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the pocket of a sling. And it shall come to pass when the Lord has done for my Lord according to all the good he's spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, that this will be no grief to you, nor offense of your heart, nor to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or my Lord has avenged himself, because the Lord has dealt with my Lord. Then remember your maidservants. David, please don't take this into your own hands. The Lord will take care of my scoundrel husband. And when my scoundrel husband has been avenged because of his slight toward you, when he has had vengeance of the Lord enacted upon him because of the slight toward you, then you're going to rise. And by the way, David, remember, God's got a higher and greater purpose for you than messing with and being concerned with this insignificant, small scoundrel who has slighted you in this way. And then she says something significant at the end of verse 31. Then remember your maidservant. Put a peg there. That'll become important in just a moment. Then we come to Act 3, verse 32. Then David said to Abigail, blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed and avenging myself with my own hand. For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to me, surely by morning light no males would have been left to Nabal. Abigail, if it had not been for you, this would have been a scorched earth policy. Not only would Nabal have been wiped out, there wouldn't have been none of his servants wiped out. But notice what David says first of all. He said, blessed is the Lord. David understands. Blessed is the Lord. And then he says, blessed are you, Abigail. Question, where in this narrative so far has God ever told Abigail, you do this? But yet David is blessing God because of what Abigail has done. And he has attributed what Abigail is doing to God telling her to do this. But we don't find where God said that. Where did God say that in the narrative? Then why does David bless God for telling Abigail to do this? Because anytime anyone does what is right, they do it because God has created within man a desire to do what is right. Man has to forsake his conscience. Man has to sear his conscience to do what is wrong. And anytime anyone does what is right, it is at the leading of God Himself. And so you have him praising God. Verse 35. So David received from her hand what she brought to him and said to her, "Go up in peace to your house, and see, I have heeded your voice and respected your person." And Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was, holding a feast in his house like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. Therefore she told him nothing, little or much, until the morning light. And so it was in the morning, when the wine had gone from Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became like stone. Then it happened, after about 10 days, that the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. David is going to kill him, and Abigail says, "No, let the Lord take care of this." God praises the Lord and praises Abigail because of her great wisdom in sparing David and being a man of blood, and in sparing all the men of Nabal and the nation that was there. And now then you have, as this scene concludes, Abigail turning home, and there she finds her drunken husband, evermore demonstrating the scoundrel that he is. And instead of slapping him upside the head and said, "Don't you know, you ungrateful scoundrel, I have saved you this day, that David and his men were coming to slay you," she goes to bed. And she goes to sleep, and she wakes up the next morning. And when she wakes up the next morning, she told him the things that had happened. And now then, here's something that is said that is hard to understand. His heart died within him. I wish I could tell you I know what that means. I don't know what exactly that means. But whatever it means, it led to what happened 10 days later, that Nabal is struck by the Lord and he died. You know, Abigail has put up with this scoundrel. We don't know how long. It's a wonder that she didn't say anywhere in this narrative, "You know, I have been sick and tired of living with this jerk. He's a scoundrel, he's evil, he's hatred, he treats his men terribly. And now then David's going to come," and she hears David's going to come, and she could have just gone to the South 40 and said, "Okay, big boy, you've acted this way. There's going to be one with 600 men who are going to come. 400 men, pardon me. He's going to have 200 to watch the camp. He's going to be 400 men, and he is going to, with a scorched earth policy, kill you." And let that happen. Or to have said, "You know, finally, the Lord pays attention to this fella. And finally the Lord strikes him dead. This has been my what? This has been my day I've been looking for. This is the day of my deliverance. I've just been waiting for the Lord to come and to strike this fellow dead, and now is my day of ultimate freedom." She could have said, "You know, along the way, this guy is a jerk, and if he gets killed along the way, then here's my out. I'm now free." But that's not how Abigail behaves toward Nabal. She's not looking for a fast out here. She's not even pushing him that way. She recognized the scoundrel that he is, but still serves him as his wife, provides for him, and even goes to the extent of offering herself as a sacrifice to save his life, and she saves him from the wrath of David. What would we have done in a circumstance like that? Would we have thought, as carnal people think, that finally this is my out here, I'm going to let this run its course and I'll be free? That's how the world thinks, isn't it? The world's just looking for a fast out whenever the opportunity becomes ill-disposed in a marriage relationship, and I'm just going to wait for something to happen. In fact, if I can just kind of nudge it that way, then that'll be good too. But that's not how Abigail behaves. She is a godly woman. And she still behaves in a godly way toward her scoundrel husband. You come then to verse 39. So when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal and has kept his servant from evil, for the Lord has returned the wickedness of Nabal on his head." And David sent and proposed to Abigail, his wife. David's honest. Notice what David says. "Blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach for the hand of Nabal. Blessed be the God who wreaked vengeance upon Nabal." Notice David's not turning backflips here. David's not saying, "Yes, this is the day I've just been waiting for. I knew this was coming." That's not how David responds. David responds to the Lord by saying, "Praise be to God. Blessed be the God who has pleaded my cause." Now, I told you at the end of verse 31 to put a peg there. And the reason you put a peg there is because of what happens in the last part of verse 39. Notice as Abigail speaks to David in verse 30 and 31, she pleads with him and then says, "By the way, when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord," notice he doesn't say when David. "When the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant." And then verse 39, David remembers her and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. Abigail now becomes the wife of a king. We sing the song someday. We sing the song sometime. We shall see the king someday. And finally, Abigail got to be with the king. I find that an amazing story of how Abigail behaves herself with a king who's playing the part of the fool and her husband who's playing the part of the fool. You've got three people in this story and only one is doing what is right. There are two that are doing what is wrong. What David is going to do is wrong. What Nabal has done is wrong. But what Abigail is proposing and how Abigail behaves is right. And she's the only one in the story behaving in a godly way. One is going to seek vengeance. One could care less about his fellow human being. But Abigail is concerned about her husband. She's concerned about the king. She's concerned about the men of the king. She's the only person behaving in a godly way in this story. I think there are three important lessons that we take from this story, and they each come from one of the characters. First of all, from Nabal. I find it interesting, the lessons that we learn from Nabal. I can't help but wondering as we study about this and we hear the description of Nabal and the wealth that he has, I can't help but wonder, is this the rich man the Lord has in mind when he says, "I'm going to build bigger barns"? And the Lord tells him, this day thou fool, this day you fool, who shall these things be when the Lord comes? I can't help but wonder, is Nabal the guy that the Lord has in mind here? But I think the thing we learn from Nabal here is what the Lord is concerned about. The Lord's not concerned about the things that we possess. We know that. The Lord is concerned about the kind of person we are. And Nabal is described as a scoundrel. He's described as someone that is evil. The Lord is more concerned with who we are than what we possess. I think Nabal teaches us that. The second thing that we learn from Abigail is we learn a commitment that is here. A commitment to marriage that in our day and time in our world is rare. By the way, let's pause for a moment and tie something else together here. Do you wonder, do you marvel as you go through this narrative? How can this woman that's described as Abigail is described and have a husband as Nabal is described? Well, perhaps there's at least three possibilities for that. Maybe when they both married, both were ungodly. And Abigail changed, and Nabal did not. Or second scenario, maybe when they married, both were godly. And Nabal changed, and Abigail remained righteous. Or maybe a third scenario is that Abigail had no choice in the matter. Maybe since age 5, Abigail had been promised to Nabal. Maybe Abigail's family looks at Nabal and they see, here's this rich man. Here's this wealthy man. And by the way, he is also a Calebite, the favored tribe that comes out of Judah. I mean, who can be bad when you're a Calebite? And so perhaps she had no choice at all in the matter. Maybe it was an arranged circumstance. But whichever one of those three the possibility may be, notice the commitment that she maintained in the relationship. I'm reminded of the proverb in chapter 31 that says, her husband trusts in her, and she does him good all the days of her life. Her husband trusts in her, and she does him good all the days of her life. Everything Abigail did for Nabal was good. And she did him good all the days of her life. A sidebar, please. Especially young people who are moving into the dating years and into the years in which they'll begin to think about someone with whom they're going to marry. A word of caution, a word of something to think about. If the person that you're considering to marry does not first have a commitment to God before you marry them, then don't be deceived that you're going to mother them in a commitment to God after you marry them. I know it is frequently said, you need to marry someone who is a Christian. I would say this to you. Find someone who has a love for God in their heart and a commitment to God and a commitment to do what is right. And that person is not a commit Christian, then when they are introduced to God, they will become a Christian because they have a heart for God and a heart to do what is right. But if that girl or that boy does not have a commitment to God, a commitment to do what is right before you marry them, the greater percentage is against you that they will do what is right and have a commitment to God after you marry them. But Abigail maintained her commitment to do what was right to God and do what was right to Nabal. Third, we come to David. Abigail says to David, David, you've got bigger fish to fry than this. You've got a kingdom to think about here. You're the king. Don't let this small, insignificant scoundrel over here, don't let this little gnat that's buzzing around your head keep the focus away from what you ought to be doing. You have a greater purpose. And what we learn from David is that as children of God, we have a greater purpose than being concerned with exacting the injustices that occur in our life from people who in the end that are scoundrels. Then in the end will not matter, but that the Lord will settle the score with. When is our attention more distracted? Is it when the big thing comes, when the Nabal challenges us? No. It's generally in the small things of life. The small things that buzz around our head that we just kind of swat away here and there. As they buzz around our life, they distract us. The big things we can handle. It's those small things day to day, but in that we need to remember we have a greater purpose. A greater purpose than being distracted by those smaller things. God doles out patience not in one grand dump. He doles out patience day by day, moment by moment, circumstance by circumstance. And Abigail reminded David, you have a greater purpose in life. 3 lessons that are important. Who we are is more important than what we have. Commitment to God is essential to doing what is right. And remember, we have been called to something greater and higher than the carnal things in this world that distract us. I would suggest to you 1 Samuel chapter 25 is equally a real life story today. And we can see it played out in the lives of people. That's why I entitled this, The Beauty, Abigail and the Beasts, David and Nabal. If there's something we can do this morning that will help you in your relationship with God, to help enforce your relationship with God, to help you initiate that relationship with God, then we'd be glad to do so. Won't you come while we stand and while we sing?